Michael Avenatti drops a bombshell on the day that Stormy Daniels is set to testify. He says, Trump's on trial here for falsifying business records, but Stormy falsified some business records of her own. Why? Because remember, Stormy sued Trump for defamation, lost big time, now owes him like 600 grand plus interest in terms of attorney's fees. And so she did this documentary that they published on Peacock, which is very appropriate for her genre. And in that, there's a question about whether she got paid some money. And the question is, how did that money get categorized and classified? Because you know how sticklers they are in New York. And so Avenatti posted this. And of course, we're going to get into Stormy's testimony in our next segment, but we want to set the stage, make sure we understand all of the things that are happening before this woman comes out and makes up her fantasy tale. But we'll go into that. Now, here is what Michael Avenatti posted on X. And he's in prison, by the way. So take this for what you want to take it for. Here is my statement regarding the testimony of Stormy Daniels, who is like the star witness for Alvin Bragg, even though it's a business records criminal case. Here's what Avenatti says. Will DA Bragg pursue charges against Stormy for her falsification of business records and fraud, etc.? So Avenatti posted this full statement. Let's go through it. He says, here, America, here's a question. Will DA Bragg, Alvin, or others, anyone else, charge Stormy Daniels with her own fraud, with her own falsification of business records? He says, here's the statement of Michael Avenatti. He says, last June, I was contacted by a producer called Sarah Gibson, who had requested that I assist with a documentary about my former client, Stormy Daniels. Remember, Avenatti was Stormy's lawyer for quite some time. He said, by the way, I had fired Daniels as a client February 2019. He said he learned a bunch of stuff, that maybe she lied to him about stuff, and he fired her. He says, on June 25th, 2023, at 12:09 Pacific time, I spoke with Miss Gibson by phone on a recorded line, as all jail calls are. He's in prison, so she calls in. Hey, I'd like to talk to Michael Avenatti. Perfect. Here's a recorded line. It's all there. We'll see if the jail has it or not. And I asked her a number of questions so I could determine whether I would agree to participate. He says, I was particularly interested in knowing whether the project was going to be legitimate and fair. Is this a real documentary? Or instead, is this going to be a puff piece designed to put Stormy Daniels in a favorable light while ignoring facts and trashing me and Donald Trump? I wanted nothing to do with the project if it was the latter. So my first question to Miss Gibson, Stormy Daniels' Peacock producer, says when we spoke was whether Daniels was being paid for the documentary, right? Seems logical. So I asked this question, says Michael Avenatti, because if she was being paid for the documentary, it would be a clear indication to me that the project lacked integrity, that it would be one-sided and controlled by Daniels. Now, Miss Gibson, the producer, told me that Daniels was being paid for the documentary, but that because she owed Trump hundreds of thousands of dollars from a defamation judgment that Trump won, and Stormy was ordered to pay attorney's fees on that, she said, I'll never pay. Hundreds of thousands, I think 600 now, from a judgment Trump was trying to collect from Miss Daniels because she owed him that money. They, meaning Stormy Daniels, the producer, and others, some might say a group of conspirators, they had come up with a plan. There it is, conspiracy. Common schemer plan that would allow Daniels to be secretly paid. While at the same time keeping the payments from Trump and his attorneys. Now, among other things, she told me that they had fictionally also optioned the rights to Daniels' new book. We're going to hear her testify about that. And then routed the money that Daniels demanded through a fabricated trust that had been set up in the name of Stormy's daughter, all to hide the money from Trump so that they don't have to pay him the judgment of the $600K. Isn't that interesting? So it's NBC, producer, and Stormy all trying to hide money that another court says that Stormy legitimately owes to Trump. It's trying to avoid having the judgment affect that batch of dollars. So this feels like it's falsifying a business entry, a business payment. I wonder if NBC is going to be charged for giving her money and creating this entire fiction to undermine a lawful court order. To say that I was shocked, says Michael Avenatti, when I was told this would be an understatement. He says, you did what for her? A woman I had never met called Miss Gibson. I've never spoken to her. She was admitting to me on a recorded line with the jails that Stormy Daniels, that she and others had engaged in multiple overt criminal acts, both state and federal, including falsification of business records, wire fraud, and fraudulent transfers, all in an effort to defraud Trump and to avoid paying him what was legally due. And so due to the fraud, we have Michael Avenatti, who's sitting in prison. He's like, I'm not committing another fraud. I've got to learn my lesson on that one. So due to the fraud, I declined to participate in the documentary. So he says, if what Miss Gibson from NBC and Peacock, if what they told me on a recorded line is true, and there is every reason to believe it is, how can Bragg possibly rely on the testimony of Daniels, who herself is guilty of fraud and who recently falsified business records to cover cover up a crime, right? You change a business record, which is a fraudulent transfer or a wire fraud. So they say that Trump's underlying object offense was that he was trying, we don't know what it is yet ultimately, but that he was trying to illegally influence an election, even though that was a law that applies to state elections, not federal elections. Okay. They're saying that there's some other object crime, right? The business record was changed in order to cover something else up. Exactly what Stormy's doing. You're trying to cover up a fraudulent transfer. That's not Stormy's money, Stormy. That's not your daughter's money, Stormy. That's Trump's money via a court order from another judge. You owe him that. You're trying to avoid paying on a judgment. That's a crime. Will DA Bragg or others be promptly filing criminal charges against Daniels or other people involved in this scheme? Great questions, Michael Avenatti. Of course, he's a lawyer and he's using a bunch of language from conspiracy, right? He's very clear. There was a plan there. And you'll notice the other word that is common to criminal charges out there, it's the word overt, wherever that one was. She engaged in multiple overt criminal acts, right? An act in furtherance of the conspiracy, of the common scheme or plan. So maybe they'll get hit with an indictment or something, but my guess is no, because only one set of rules applies to Trump. They get to do whatever they want all the time with no consequences. So here is Stormy Daniels. Now, we're going to hear her testify in our next segment, so jump over there if you want to jump there. We'll get there soon. But Stormy, I want to give us a little update on what she looks like and sounds like and some background before we get into it. So, of course, she released a documentary, and there were some excerpts of this that CNN had, and they were talking about her take on this. And here she is explaining herself. She got paid for this. Michael Avenatti says this money got routed into her daughter's trust fund. Here's what she says.
My friend was like, you might actually have a problem. I don't want to scare you, but based on the things you've told me, now you're the whole Republican Party's problem, and they like to make their problems go away. It was really about two things: trying to keep the story from coming out so that it would not hurt my husband and my daughter, and I wouldn't lose my life, and that there would be a paper trail and money trail linking me to Donald Trump so that he could not have me killed. All I had to do was sign this piece of paper and collect $130,000.
She kind of sounds like she might be intoxicated, no? Like there's a little bit of slurring or some marbles in her mouth. Kind of sounds a little Joe Biden-y. Here's another clip from the doc.
Ties to some of it, but they've also become more violent with me. I'm more prepared with my legal knowledge, but I'm also tired. Like my soul is so tired.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
you're pretty worn
and
out.
I don't know if I'm
you?
so much a warrior now.
Yeah, you're pretty worn down, aren't you? Worn out.
Out of man.
Yeah.
I'm out of
Oh, good. Okay, so that's from her documentary, right? So she's out of F's and she's just worn out, which is the understatement of the year. Now, before we get into her testimony, she denied this affair absolutely twice. Here is one image of January 10th image. She signed it. It's going to come up during testimony. She says, I recently became aware that certain news outlets are alleging that I had a sexual and or romantic affair with Donald Trump many, many, many years ago. I am stating with complete clarity that this is absolutely false. My involvement with Donald Trump was limited to a few public appearances and nothing more. When I met Donald Trump, he was gracious, professional, and a complete gentleman to me and everyone in my presence. Rumors that I have received hush money from Donald Trump are completely false. If indeed I did have a relationship with Trump, trust me, you wouldn't be reading about it in the news. You would be reading about it in my book. The fact of the matter is, these stories are not true. First statement. And then just about 2 weeks later, she sends another one. This was on January 30th, and this one says, over the past few weeks, I've been asked countless times to comment on reports of an alleged sexual relationship I had with Donald Trump many, many, many years ago. The fact of the matter is that each party to this alleged affair denied its existence in 2006, 2011, 2016, 2017, and now again in 2018. Stormy says, I am not denying this affair because I was paid, quote, hush money, as has been reported in overseas owned tabloids. I am denying this affair because it never happened. I will have no further comment on this matter. Please feel free to check out me on Instagram at the Stormy Daniels. Okay, don't do that. Thank you. Stormy Daniels signed both of those documents. So we're going to get into the testimony, but I wanted to just show you this. Now we compare and contrast Trump's case with everyone else, who can have much more serious problems and get away with it. And this is the document that compares and contrasts Hillary to Trump. So remember that Hillary created, using her lawyers, Mark Elias, Perkins Coie, they went out, hired Fusion GPS to create a fake PP tape by Christopher Steele, who drafted that. He was like UK intelligence, whatever. Fusion GPS was a third-party contractor who funneled this fake fake oppositional campaign research back over to the law firm, and the law firm gave it over to Hillary for America. It was a campaign expense and it was all fake. This is from the FEC. There was a complaint that was filed by Coolidge-Reagan Foundation, and they filed a complaint and they won. Hillary came back out and settled this. This is the settlement document, and the document is notifying Coolidge-Reagan that it's been settled. Commission found probable cause to believe that Hillary for America and Elizabeth Jones as treasurer violated these two laws. And so they just paid a fine, and that was the end of the deal. Now, for Trump, he gets prosecuted, and Trump didn't do anything remotely to creating fake oppositional research to influence an election. They created a fake P-tape. They said that Trump was Russian asset from Christopher Steele, literally to influence the election. And it was just a fine. This is the document signed by attorney Richard L. Weiss, who was responding from the FEC. Nobody was prosecuted, charged with a crime. So before we get to Stormy's testimony, here was just a little bit of flavor for how everything went down. CNN was saying, you know, jury wasn't really buying her porn star charm.
Jurors, Casey?
Just one thing that I've been sort of noticing as this has gone on is that there have been a couple times where she seems to be cracking a joke, trying to get a reaction from the jury, and our reporters in the room have noted that the jury hasn't seemed to respond
No, they're
to
taking
that.
their job seriously.
I mean, what do you make of that?
Humor is risky in the courtroom, especially if you go in with lines, like it looks like Stormy. If something happens spontaneously, if an easel falls over, people will laugh. They're human. But it's never going to work if you go in there like, I'm going to amuse the jury. I'm going to sort of say this clever thing.
All right, so we have enough flavor. And so now in our next segment, we're going to jump into the trial testimony. So thank you for subscribing, my friends, and we'll see you back here on the next segment.